I'm Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am really excited and interested to meet Neal Baer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Nice to virtually see you.
And are you at home? Is that your house where you are right now?
I am in Los Angeles.
Okay. Well, Neal, you are a prolific writer, a producer. You're a doctor. You have written episodes of many very important medical shows and other things like Designated Survivor, which we'll talk about, but shows like ER and the one about the victims unit. I can never remember the name of that.
On Order Special Victims Unit.
Right. All these shows which have, I know, it's amazing. I've had a huge impact on American culture. And you've done so many other things. So you have obviously a unique perspective in not only what works, why medical shows work, what it means to be a showrunner, and what's the future of the TV marketplace in the current environment that we're in. So there's so many different topics we can start at, and I know you're working on some new projects. So first, kind of like to know, like, how do you balance the fact that you are a working doctor, I don't know if you're doing it right this minute, but a working doctor and a television producer and a writer, like, how do you choose from day to day what you want to do? They're two massively exhausting professions.
Well, they're not so different, because being a good doctor requires one to be a really good storyteller, to track down the disease by doing a thorough history, figuring out what the patient's narrative is, what their story is, in other words, and then going down the right path to make the diagnosis. So I don't practice per se now, but I do a lot of work on public health issues, and I just taught a course at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government virtually called Soda Politics, which looked at the health implications of the soda industry and also looked at the economics, the environmental issues, and it was really fascinating for me as a physician, as a storyteller, because it's just an amazing story of a product that has no nutritional value whatsoever. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the way that its story is told around the world to various, individuals and groups of individuals. It's really fascinating right now. Coke always has a slogan, and their new slogan is "Alone Together," as if drinking a Coke makes you feel like you're together with people. So it's really like an amazing industry study with different lenses, like from the environmental impact. Coke's the number one polluter of plastic. And you can understand that when you think about it. And, government subsidies, obesity, it's just, and employment. They employ thousands and tens of thousands of people. So it's complex. So I always try to bring my medical background, my interest in public health, to the work that I do. So it's not either or, it's both. And it always has been since I worked on the show China Beach, and then on to ER for 7 years, and then SVU for 11, and now Designated Survivor. Always has a medical element to it. This year, in the third season of Designated Survivor on Netflix, we talk about a number of health issues. We talk about, through one of our characters, what it means to be HIV positive and undetectable, and the fact that you can't transmit. There's been no case scientifically studied of someone who's untransmissible because they're taking their medication, infecting someone else with HIV. And then we did a big storyline with Anthony Edwards, who was on ER with me, on the opioid crisis and the cover-ups by the FDA and various other industries. So always looking at, stories, and so much of our lives depend on our health that it's not hard to find ways to talk about health on TV. And it's not just through, a show like ER, but it's all the shows I've done.
And you also did an episode called Outbreak, right? That was about a pandemic.
Well, I did. No, so I did on Designated Survivor this past season on Netflix. The whole season is about a pandemic. So that's current. And actually on Twitter, I go on and I'm amazed to see that people are lasering in on the fact that, one, we did a pandemic, two, we have a scene between Maggie Q and Chuck Owuji, the two actors who carried the storyline, talking about if someone gets on a plane and they cough and the droplets go out and how many people are infected, and they
It
get
was
out
so
in
prescient.
Vancouver, they get out in Shanghai, and it was prescient. And then the pandemic actually harmed people of color most. And it also had an impact on voting. So it was like, wow, how did they know about Wisconsin? How did they know about voting? How did they know that COVID would strike people of color more? And the answer is, we talked to a lot of experts, and we knew that another pandemic was in store because of SARS and MERS. We knew that there was a lot of research on these bats that harbor coronavirus, and that it was a matter of time. There was work published that showed that there are many, many different coronaviruses. Mm-hmm. And the one they found in bats that they published in 2017 has a 96% match with the one that's infecting people now. So this should come as no surprise. This was here since early 2000s with SARS and MERS, and it's going to happen again unless we start to really identify and work on, not exposing ourselves to wild species that harbor these viruses. So we were prescient only because we talked to experts and they informed us, and that's always been the path for my shows, is not making things up.
Well, I really respect that. I think that shows that try to think ahead, that do a little science fiction and talk to the scientists to find out what's possible. Like, of course, I'm a big fan of Star Trek, the original. So, they did a lot of research and talking to science fiction authors to figure out what was possible. But to make it so close to the truth, I mean, maybe you need to do a show about when it will be solved or when a vaccine will be found. I think your prediction was a few months. I think I saw in one episode.
Yeah, well, that part's not true. But in our show, the virus was transmitted because it was manipulated using CRISPR technology. So I have a new show I'm working on that. But again, how did we know? Well, we talked to a bioweapons expert from Johns Hopkins who does CRISPR research. We talked to the person who invented gene drives from MIT. So we go to the source. It's like, and when we did Designated, we had in our room President Obama's deputy press secretary. So we want the little details to be accurate. And so he's there telling us, we asked one day, does the White House have a problem with rodents? And he goes, yes, but it's a real problem, or termites. And he said, yes, but it's a historical landmark and you have to be really careful and you can't just have everybody move out. And so we had a mouse run across Kiefer Sutherland's feet in one episode. And then I think sometime this past year, we heard that there was a vermin infestation in the White House. So it's like people respond to that because it's like, who'd make that up? And so we didn't. So there's Eric Schultz was our advisor. He told us of the story of a member of the White House. I think it was one of the president's chiefs of staff who wouldn't allow anybody to sit down. So all the meetings were standing up. He had a standing desk. And so we made Anthony Edwards' character do that. And it just works when you really kind of plunge into the reality. Because I always say that, trying to make the extraordinary ordinary. And you kind of you feel like, oh, that seems crazy, but I believe it. So that's what it is.
But it also the show reminded me a little bit of an old movie called The President's Analyst. That's a really oldie. Yes, because Kirkland has an analyst, right? He has somebody because his wife died. I mean, we're getting into the weeds of the show, but that was interesting. I thought
played by the actor who was on 30-something. Now it's just terrible.
With the red hair?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. You wonder if that is going on now, or maybe Trump doesn't do any of that. I don't know if he
Trump,
would ever. I don't think he would submit himself to that kind of,
well, he's
revealing experience. But anyway,
probably
uh, yeah. I mean, I know that the new project you're coming out with is called The Edit,
right.
right? So why don't you tell me a little bit more about that project? I mean, how you think you're going to be able to get that produced, or is that a several year down the road project?
Well, I can't disclose too much because we're in the process of putting it together. But I don't think. No, I'm hoping that it can be, done soon. But there are just the exigencies now of when can we go back and shoot things. So I'm thinking that there are different ways to do things. I was very impressed that a show on NBC with James Spader finished up the season with animation.
I don't think I saw that, but I did see. There was another show, maybe it was on CBS, that where they all of the characters, the actors, remained in character and pretended to, we're at home, but basically we're doing the whole storyline as if they were home.
Sure, but I think the show with James Spader was very clever to go to a sort of a graphic novel approach.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of room for innovation right now. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean?
Across the board, not just in TV, but I teach at a Harvard medical school too, and this is the first year that the incoming class of doctors will be virtual study.
Right.
And so that's, kind of shaking things up. And I think it really has forced people to contemplate what is it that we do together that's necessary to do together and what is not necessary. So certainly we need the collegiality, the collaboration, but we don't need to teach students about neurotransmitters and the biosynthesis of them. They can go online and learn that, and they can see a lecture on it online. But what we can do is bring them together in the classroom, which is what they do at Harvard now, and they get a case and they study it from a physiological, pathophysiological, social, familial, psychopharmacological approach, and they talk about questions they have. And it's an interactive, iterative approach, which is, I think, really how we learn and how we put together our ideas. So we can do that online too by making breakout rooms and have the students still work in groups virtually. It's not as ideal, I don't think, because there's something about being in a room with somebody where you can really see their gestures and facial movements, but we can still do that via Zoom. And it's forced us to sort of think about, like, as I just said, what's important. So maybe it's not so important to teach facts and hear lectures in a room. That is just as easily done online, and maybe it's even more convenient, so you don't have to get up early. But what we need to think about, and what the pandemic has forced us to do, is think about new ways to interactively work with students, and that might be a better way heuristically to teach. So it's, across, like I was talking to one of my students, and she's doing a project in San Bernardino, and she was telling me that a lot of teenagers are going to have to go to work because their families are really strapped for cash. And just because you couldn't pay the rent for 3 months doesn't mean you get a 3-month grace. You got a grace period.
Even if you got that kind of deal from your landlord, not everybody's getting
you have
that.
To pay for it. So kids are going to go to work. So what do we do if we don't want them to drop out? So who says school has to be from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m.? Can it be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.? And can it be flexible so that kids can take courses online while they're working and then go back into school? So it's making us rethink the space in which we do things. And it's making us rethink about the air quality in LA and Delhi. And, people are seeing things in Delhi they've never seen before in their lives. So yes, the pandemic is horrible, but there's a bright side to it, I think, in that it's teaching us that we can draw on our creativity, and we don't have to fall back on, well, this is just the way we do it. We go to school from, 8 to 2, and we go to school because mom and dad, or mom or dad alone, or dads or moms are working, and we need some place to send them. Well, that's, or we're not working in, we work in the fields in the summer. Maybe schools should be year round. That was a big thing in the 70s, and then it kind of has fallen away. So it's forcing us to rethink how we do things and maybe make it better.
I know my daughter, is thrilled that she doesn't have to get up at the crack of dawn to get to school by, 7 or whatever it is, 7:30. And she loves that more relaxed situation. And she said the Zoom time with the teachers are really about giving them guidance about what they're supposed to do and sort of checking in. And when it's not a lecture and they can go pursue their own resources, and it's sort of this interaction with video and self training and being self-directed, I think in some ways reminds me of the English system. I did go to school in England for a year, and it was they did do lectures, but it was more about, could you figure out, based on my guidance, how to understand this project? And I think that actually is going to teach a lot of self-reliance.
I hope so. I think Zoom does force us to target. It just feels odd to kind of kibitz. So it's like you can get that focused attention, when you're facing, and it's like, it's kind of changed the parameters of the behavior.
But she does say that, sometimes people will pretend they're there, but they're not there. They don't turn on their camera. So there's the dynamic, the control, sorry, go ahead.
Rule to say cameras must be on. I did that when I taught my course, cameras on, and, no texting. And you can kind of see when they're like, so. Yeah,
but I've got a 12-year-old. She's not in college, so,
Can still have make them have the cameras on.
Well, I do think that that education is a huge area of a huge industry that's going to be, there's going to be a lot of innovation. I know that, for example, Salesforce has been getting involved in education for a long time. I can totally see that Amazon and Microsoft, and I think I saw an article the other day about that these huge companies want to get into that business and partner with like Harvard and the big branded universities. What do you think about all of that, sort of building a huge platform in partnership with these huge corporations?
Well, that's always worrisome to me, because
as a sort of TV experience as well as whatever else they've got to offer. I mean, we're a little off topic of
profit-driven,
being a showrunner, but kind of curious.
Profit-driven. So when things are profit-driven, you're supposed to see them, that profit drive makes things more efficient. Well, it makes people cut back on things to make more profit. So we can see that with the prison system. I wouldn't say the prison system, the for-profit prison system, is more efficient. It's actually probably in many ways worse for those who are incarcerated, because it's about making money. So when you start to partner, and this has been done in the past with I think it was Channel 1 and things in the past, it was always about one, profit, two, advertising, because then advertising gets involved. And
there was a lot of advertising on Channel 1 or something. It just seemed very commercial. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, I don't think that one's education is there to be a platform to sell Skippy peanut butter, or whatever they're trying to sell. And so, and people are looking for, companies are looking for any kind of platform to promote their project, particularly, or promote their product, particularly to niche audiences. So if you had like kids who are 12, you might be promoting, Kool-Aid or something, which would be really bad. So it's like, so I think it's somewhat worrisome when things are, I'm not convinced that for-profit makes things efficient or better. It makes people money.
If you were to, I'm going in a different direction for a second. If you were to start to try to tell stories for our current times and the situation they're in, I mean, you already did the prediction of a pandemic, but if you were to start to look around at the reality of the situation we're in, where we're all in our homes and isolated, and to write a script that's not necessarily CRISPR, which is still in some ways far off in terms of how it will affect people, how would you begin to tell a story? What kind of story would you like to tell on TV? What do you think we should be watching? Do you think it should be medical, what's happening in the hospitals? Obviously, there's so much drama going on in the hospitals.
But,
It's serious. Or maybe just how people are surviving in their homes. I don't know. I'd be curious.
So I think when we look at the past, I think, we sometimes hear, well, there will be no post-COVID shows because people don't want to deal with that. But there are, when there's been a crisis or a big historical point, like World War II, there were a lot of movies, post-World War II, The Best Years of Our Lives, for one,
Great movie.
Exactly.
Superb movie.
Dealt with people struggling, and it was a huge hit. Or,
Yes.
we've had dystopic movies like On the Beach in the late 50s.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, Fred Astaire, and Anthony Perkins.
Really? All in the same movie? Those people?
Crazy movie about annihilation and the song Waltzing Matilda. And it's an amazing film and great cast. And it's, not a happy, it's not a happy, spoiler alert ending. So, so it's not like we just we do both. We do aspirational. So we'll see a lot of aspirational. And I think we'll see how people are dealing with a new kind of world. But who knows, when we're going to be able to make these shows, because there's so many issues, like down to the basics of who's going to ensure the production. And will it be that they'll insure it except for COVID? So if that's the case, what if people get COVID? Because, how do you do makeup and hair and wardrobe and talk to the actors? And yes, you can social distance to some extent, but you can't really social distance with hair and makeup. Yes, you can wear a mask. So we can try all those things, and we know that those reduce, to a great extent, being reduced transmission, but it doesn't guarantee it. So nothing's 100%. So, but it can reduce it. But still, what if someone catches COVID? Will they be able to sue, or will they sign a waiver? So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of all that for production.
I think that there was an article last few days in the New York Times about a production that is going to be, or is currently, I need to go look, quarantining all the performers and the cast sort of together, so that that they are okayed to collaborate. What do you think about that kind of?
Well, I think that will work, but here's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's like HIV. It's like, that's why condoms were promoted, because no one knows, where anyone has been. They may say where they've been. So are you telling me that the actors and the whole crew are going to be locked into a hotel and not allowed to leave? And if they come and go because they have their temperature taken, sorry, that's not a guarantee. So you just don't know. This is why we social distance. We just don't know where anybody's been. They may tell us, just like people said, oh, I haven't had sex with anybody, and then it turns out they, transmitted HIV because, oops, they lied. Because unfortunately, human beings are flawed and they lie. So yeah, you can quarantine everybody and you can hope that they're going to behave, but how many does it take for one to think, well, I just want to go out to a bar tonight. I just want to go hook up with somebody. And then they come back. Hello. So you can do all that, but that's no guarantee. Unless you imprison them, then you can do it. Seriously. You don't know where anyone's been.
I have to go look at the article, but they might be doing that. You might have to sign a document or something. I have to go look.
Who cares if you sign a document? People lie. People, break the law. I hear this all the time about CRISPR, for instance. Well, it's illegal to do germline research, to do germline editing, which means editing an embryo so that it transmits, or so that the offspring are evolutionarily changed, and their offspring will be too. And it's like, so what? So there's a law. So there's a law that says don't jaywalk. There's a law that says don't drink and drive. There's a law that says don't murder. So you
I
tell
know
me,
that
you stop.
I know the Chinese were saying that, that they weren't working on embryos. Then they said they admitted that they did
Oh, yeah,
work on
yeah.
embryos. Then there were people who have been born that
Oh,
have been
twins.
edited.
There were
And then
twins.
I know, yeah, and I know we're getting way off topic here, but
No, but we're illustrating the point that
yeah.
signing documents is lovely, but
Mhm.
all it takes is one person to go out and come back with something, and who cares what documents were signed? People are human beings who are flawed, and they lie, and not everyone does, thank God. But it's about trusting, and ultimately, I say as a physician, when you protect yourself, that's why I did the first storyline about a character who was HIV positive, ongoing on ER, Gloria Rubin's character. And I say, it's always about trust. And yes, we can trust each other, and I think that's important. But I think the first point is to protect oneself. So, I've just seen too many patients and people who trusted their partner and they got HIV. And that's
Uh,
human nature.
Onto the topic though of storytelling right now and in the situation we're in, do you think that we're ready for a show that would be about dealing with a pandemic inside the hospital and showing what people are really going through, or is that too close to the bone? Maybe that's
I
happening
don't
where
think
people
anything
do it
is.
like a Zoom piece or
Yeah,
something?
I don't think anything
Uh,
is close to the bone because, we adapt. Like when we did the storyline on HIV on ER, when we started it, there was no treatment. You pretty much died unless you had the mutated receptor. And then that was in 95. And then in 96, boom, the triple cocktail, rising like Lazarus, people on their deathbed lived because of this amazing miracle drug combination. And so we adjusted the storyline to the science. And so why not? I mean, I don't think that there's,
I think people need to see it. I think right now people should really see some kind of fictionalized version because they're only getting snatches of what's going on. It's kind of like there's so many people don't think it's real, and all these kids are
that's,
out in their beaches and their bars
well,
on the
that's another whole issue. We're all in this together, really, because you're going out to a beach or bar means that you're putting yourself, if you're not, social distancing or wearing a mask, means you're putting yourself at risk to catching it and taking it to all of the people that you come in contact with, which is why we talk about contact tracing. I did the show. It never was made, but I pitched it in 1994 because I did an ABC after-school special in 1989 called Private Affairs about a teenage girl who gets gonorrhea from her boyfriend, played by.
I miss my after school specials from when I was a
It was great.
kid. I loved after school specials
It
because
was
you could
Kerry
just
Green.
relax. You
Oh,
could relax. You could watch these amazing little, shows.
It was fun. It was with Kerry Green, who was the star of Lucas and Goonies, and and the next one I pitched, but then they went out of business, was called Connections, and it was about a kid who gives his girlfriend gonorrhea, and she sleeps with another kid, and he gives it to two other kids, and it's like, and we were going to do it. So this was in 1994. This is nothing new. It spreads, and that's how HIV just spread because people aren't monogamous, even if they say they are. And so, just like it goes back to this point we made about sequestering everybody in the hotel for the TV series. Yeah, if they're really sequestered.
This is really off topic, but I remember in the 80s when Rock Hudson it was announced that he had HIV.
Yeah.
I was in New York City at the time, and I remember being down at for the Halloween celebration in Washington Square Park.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was packed, thousands like sardines, everybody down there to hang out. And somebody yelled out, "She's got AIDS," or I don't remember who it was, or "He's got AIDS," and all of a sudden it was like a wave of human beings because nobody knew back then, how you got it. I know that's not related to how virus spreads, but it's just an interesting memory.
Also, that shifted Reagan too, because he and Nancy were friends with Rock Hudson.
Rock Hudson.
They had to acknowledge HIV and AIDS then. But, we can see that with HIV AIDS, we knew how to prevent it. It's transmissible, but in a very different way from COVID. So it was, that's why we didn't have, the massive numbers that we do now. But we still had millions of people around the world with HIV and AIDS, and we still do. In Los Angeles, 40% of African American men who have sex with men are HIV positive. And in the South, in major cities like Jackson or Columbia or Shreveport, almost 50% of African American men who have sex with men are positive. So we have the
Today.
Today.
Is that
Today. So we have the Medicaid. So that's why stigma, access, cost. So we have medication to treat it, so you're not transmissible, and we have medication to prevent you getting it, called PrEP. And yet we still have these high rates. So we don't do a very good job of educating and making medication accessible. So this is always a problem, and that's where I think getting to the topic, here right now is, so what do you do about it? And the answer is, in part, you tell really powerful emotional stories that highlight it. So that's why we did the story on Designated about a young African-American gay guy who is HIV positive, because you hadn't seen that on television where he's undetectable, and people don't know what that means. And if they knew what it meant, now a lot of people do, but most of the writers in our room didn't fully understand what it meant. So if you're undetectable, it means you take your medication regularly, and it means there's never been a case, we have the science that shows there's never been a case of transmission. So we should be able to stop HIV. But why don't we? Because people are people, and they don't tell the truth, and they don't take their medication, or they don't have access to it, or they're afraid because of the stigma.
Well, it's so expensive. It's so expensive.
Unless you have good health insurance. So there's so many barriers. And I think it's really important to tell those stories. So that's why we told that story about a young man who's undetectable and doesn't tell his partner until after they've had sex, and what all the ramifications were. So that's how to do it, I think, and to fight the alternate facts, which, take up more and more space that, are not.
It's almost like I kind of really would like to see a show that deals with creating a fiction series, fictionalized series that talks about the situation we're in. Maybe it's from Zoom, where people are all over the place, but are helping people to understand the seriousness of what happens when you don't social distance, and when you do get it, and the types of people, and all of these issues we've been discussing.
Sure.
What's happening in LA with the creative community? What are they discussing? What do they think is even possible right now? Is there a lot of percolating going on, or
sure, everybody's
what's happening?
They're trying to figure out what to do, how to shoot. Should we shoot at a resort? Should we shoot at a hotel? How do we do that? How do we, that's sort of the bottom line, sort of, how do we do that? As you were just saying that you had read that in the New York Times. So I think it's not clear. We'll see how it changes things. Will it change people? Are people changed in the sense of what they want in their lives now? Have they experienced new ways of being in relationships? How will that affect them?
I'm actually speaking to my family more than I ever spoke. All my extended family, my cousins. I know everyone's doing this, like weekly calls with their family. Sure. That actually would be a great format right there. The dramas on Zoom, somebody out there might do something with that. I think that's a good idea. We've been having all these virtual surprise birthday parties. I mean, we're not doing anything unique, but it's been fun to create our own content, like family TV.
Sure. Well, there's that whole element too, that people can create their own, and they do on YouTube. We have traditional, quote, in quotes, TV on the broadcast networks that are procedural, like the CBS shows, particularly, and the NBC show. And then we've got YouTube influencers and people who do their various kinds of things that likely the audience, say for CBS, has no idea about. And so the CBS skew is pretty old, for instance. So
right.
those viewers probably have no idea who the, social media mavens are of YouTube and who are doing shows. And that's what kids are watching. So it's so fractured. When I did ER in the mid 90s, I did an episode in 1995, in November of 95, yes, with George Clooney saving a kid in a tunnel, called Hell and High Water. And it was George.
You had an Emmy nomination for that.
I did. George did, and his first for the show. And the director won the DGA award for it, Chris Chulak. And the show had, that night, it was in November, 48 million viewers. Now, there's no TV show except, Super Bowl, something like that.
Why do you think that was? Yeah.
Because there weren't all the choices. So the audience had, the 4 networks back then, NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, and it had HBO and stuff, but it just, we didn't have Twitter. We didn't have, Facebook. So it's like people could go and do, chat rooms about ER, which they did. But it was still what I call unidirectional. I made it, you consumed it, but I could read the chat rooms. Now with Twitter, ever since SVU, I made what were called bubble tweets, these 30-second little videos that I put up, and then they would pop. And that's why they're called bubble tweets. And I would put those out, and I would bit.ly them, and then I'd have connections with different people who they would put them out in the whole network. It's kind of like that movie Plandemic that just came out.
Oh yeah.
How it seeped through the culture and through all these different social media forms. So now it's multi-directional. So I deliver a show, and you tell me when you're watching it, while you're watching it on Twitter, what you're thinking, and I can be on Twitter and I can respond if I choose to. So that's a whole different modality from what we did before, which is I make it, you consume it, and I hope you like it. Now it's like I can talk to you while you're watching it, and we never conceived of that. So,
I know as a storyteller or as a showrunner, I think today you've got to have a handle on so many different platforms. How do you tell stories using Twitter behind the scenes after the show is over? How do you bring those characters in there? How do you control the actors? What are the contracts related to the management of all that stuff behind the scenes? How are we going to deal with these new shows that are going to pop up in Zoom and you can only shoot on Zoom? I mean, it seems like it's just getting more complex and more complex. Yeah. So
and more fractured and more niche. If you want to watch a show in a Korean soap opera all day, you can. But when I was doing ER, you did not have the choices. So it was more of a campfire where everybody sat around and watched. Now it's people in their own cubicle can watch and hear in the echo chamber exactly what they want to hear. And that builds fear and anxiety. And
what do you think about those watch parties? Netflix offers that capability now. There's so many other apps out there where people would, in a group or in a private group, watch and comment and interact. Is that watching TV? Is that experiencing it? Is that something you would love to see done more?
Sure. How do you feel about that? It reminds me of the old days when the family watched a show because they might have had one TV in the living room and then everybody had their own TVs. Because TVs got less expensive. So then they were watching their own show. But originally, people listened to the radio. They could listen to one station at a time and hear it. And then they watched one show at a time. But now you can watch 5 shows. I mean, I remember George Clooney saying once, I brought a friend of mine over to the set, and he was a correspondent for ABC named John McKenzie. And George said, I saw you last night. And it was like, I said, George, what do you have 5 TVs on? He goes, yeah. And it was like he's watching George was always.
Well, he loves news, right? He did that Edward R. Murrow movie or something, didn't he? He likes the news business.
But he's also taking in.
Yeah.
So he's like multi-watching. So I think that's really interesting. And so just the format has changed. So in a way, Netflix is just going back to the campfire approach, which is we're all going to sit around the campfire, but we're going to do it virtually. And there's some connectivity to that I think is a good thing. Why not chat about it and have a conversation about what you like, didn't like, what kind of discussion does it spur? We did a study with ER on an episode where we looked at how much people learned from a show about human papillomavirus and cervical cancer. And what was interesting is that like huge number of our viewers said that they went, like 1 out of 7 said that they went to a physician after they saw our show. And like a third talked about what they saw with a family member or a friend. So the shows spur conversation. And so why not have it, you know, while you're watching? Now, while you're watching, you can't get into a big conversation because you'll stop seeing the show, but you can all have this viewing experience. It's kind of like going to a movie. And then afterward, you can share it.
I definitely prefer interactive. In fact, I'd love for Televisionation shows like this to be live. In fact, we're going to probably do that with our virtual event. That's another story coming out soon. I think interactive discussion around programming is definitely a more memorable, exciting experience. Reminds me of the Talmud.
Yes. It's all peripatetic, as we say.
Talmud TV, right? We should be doing Talmud TV for, or maybe not, but it's definitely right. Sitting around a text, sitting around a screen, everybody commenting. I think those ancient rabbis sort of understood something more than we did earlier on. All right, I think that's probably a great place to stop because I could continue to go on, but thank you very, very much. Or not but this has been really enjoyable. And by the way, I gave up drinking soda a long time ago because of all that aspartame.
Yes, well, good for you because we have a lot of data on both sugar sweetened and diet soda, and it's, you know,
bad for you. Bad. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
And as much as I love sparkling water, we kind of given that up too because it erodes the calcium in your teeth. So anyway, that's our health advice of the day. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for the work that you're doing.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Positive things for humankind. I really appreciate that and how you've influenced American culture. Keep going. I can't wait to see your next project.
Thanks. Great to see you.
Go watch Designated Survivor. There are 3 seasons. It's so complicated, plot twisting, great acting, all kinds of amazing things happen, and I hope you enjoy it and his work. Neal Baer, thank you for joining us here at Televisionation. I'm Tracy Swedlow. Contact me anytime to participate. You can find out all about us at TVOTshow.com. Thank you, Neal.
Be well.
You too.